after a year, I became his regular training partners, and I would travel with him around the world. Wherever he would play tournaments, we would train before. However, injuries began to creep in. Why? Because Shahar had built up from literally the age of 3. He had built up his stamina, his fitness. And for me, it was all or nothing. Either I train like an amateur or don't train at all, or I train like the world champion. And my body couldn't handle it, and I started injuries. Initially, mild injuries. Ankle, I took 2 days off, or my knee started hurting a little bit, 3-4 days off. Back was a bit uncomfortable, nothing serious. I would go back to training, all or nothing. Either I don't train at all, or I train like the world champion, because I want to be like him. And I continued doing that for 4 years. Injuries on and off, getting more and more severe until at the age of 20, 21, the doctor told me, you have a choice. You can continue training and playing professional squash, but then you're risking your back and you will probably need to be operated on very soon. Or you can give up professional squash. With an extremely heavy heart, I gave up professional squash. I gave up my dream, applied to college, and came here. Here, the exact same pattern continued. Only before it was squash, now it was academics that became the central part of my life. The knot returned very shortly after freshman week, because every paper had to be perfect. Every word had to be read and summarized. Every assignment had to be executed immaculately, all or nothing. And I was unhappy. And it was on one day during my sophomore year, as a 23-year-old sophomore, where I said to myself, enough. Enough. Here I am in such a wonderful place, with such wonderful students, such wonderful teachers, such a privilege, and I'm so unhappy. I don't think it is something that is external. I must understand myself better. And it was at that point that I decided to switch my concentration to philosophy and psychology, wanting to understand the meaning of a happy life, wanting to understand how I could become happier and why I was not. And it was very quickly that I realized that I understood that I was engaged or suffering from something that is so common, so pervasive, and so misunderstood: perfectionism. This is what I want to talk about today and what I want to talk about in the next lecture. This notion of perfectionism and what the research has to say about it. Now, there is no perfect perfectionist. There is no one person who is on this extreme, nor is there a perfect person who is on the excellence extreme, which I will depict later. The key is, how do I become happier? And I become happier by being less and less perfectionistic. Perfectionism is not about giving up ambition. I'm as ambitious, or possibly more ambitious, than I was at the age of 16 or 23. It's about having a different approach toward the journey of our life, toward each step of the way, specifically toward failure. So what I'm going to talk about is, first of all, define it so that we understand it, because it is misunderstood. I'm going to talk about characteristics. We're going to get to that next time only. The characteristics, what it means to be a perfectionist. Then I'm going to talk about the consequences. And then, how it's possible to be both successful and happy. Again, the question that we asked in the goal-setting lecture, the question that essentially we're asking throughout the class. It's not about giving up success. It's not about giving up the conventional currency. But it's about also enjoying the ultimate currency, more importantly, because it is the ultimate currency. Then we understand, what is the source of perfection? Where does it come from? Because if we understand where it comes from, we're much more likely to be able to overcome it. And then, most importantly, how do we overcome it? And how do we help other people overcome perfectionism? And again, not giving up their ambition, not giving up hard work, not giving up the pain of failure, because that's inevitable, but simply having a more rational, a more helpful, more empowering approach toward failure. Okay, so let's get to work. I need a volunteer. I need a volunteer, but before you put your hand up, it's a very special kind of volunteer. I need a volunteer who is a very good artist, a volunteer who can draw really well. No pressure here, right? A volunteer who can draw really well and who will actually come here and demonstrate. Now remember, it takes courage to come up to the stage, but courage is not about not having fear. It's about having fear and going ahead anyway. So, do I have a volunteer? I have a volunteer. Why don't you come up?